do one thing. We have to read from no individual rises to these heights, right? So we'll read from there, but I will first tell you what he has said in the previous para so that we get the continuity. Okay? Yeah. So what he has said in the previous para, that this thinker is imposing his moral ideas on society, and it is slightly successful but not fully, because people agree that there should be morality, but nobody really follows the rules. Okay, mostly thieving goes on, murdering goes on, okay, all sorts of sinning goes on. So although they accept in principle, they don't really practice it. So I'm reading out the summary of what he said earlier. But the success of the thinker and idealist to force society to submit to his own mind-determined ideals is only relative, not fully successful. Society may have accepted the moral ideals, but has not practiced them or reached accomplishment. Very far from it. The third law of ethical behavior, moral behavior, keeps clashing with the second law of personal needs and desires. Because the individual who is at a lower level will continue to have desire and will continue to behave in his own way. But society will naturally put a bar to his desires. This actually means that the vital and physical needs of the average individual are so strongly entrenched in the outer nature by the past right of persistence, by the old habit which is not dissolved yet, that the mind of modern idealism does not have any control over the vital desires. Okay? The mind of modern idealism. Most men, they cannot control their desires. Okay? So, even the past, not only desires, but even customs, prejudices, interests, passions of the caste, the clan, the religious community, the society, the nation are major obstacles for the establishment of morality. So long as this is there, it will be very difficult. That's why the habits and even the customs don't disappear very easily at all. They don't disappear. They continue to remain, but they lose their spirit. And only the outer letter of the law is maintained. Okay. The moral idealist is rigid, has no value or need for the second law of personal desires. He says there should be no desires, there should be perfect harmony with society. He actually rejects the right of the individual for satisfaction of his personal needs. His insistence on absolute morality is inflexible, rigid, okay? And he holds all else as cheap and dispensable, not at all necessary. Compared to the moral laws, then his personal needs don't have any importance at all. Personal needs are dispensable, but not truth, justice, humanitarianism. These cannot be compromised. But your personal needs can be dismissed. That's what the moralist says. Truth, justice, humanitarian, we are the highest goals of human life. That's what he has said in the previous paragraph. Now we will read what he is saying now. Do we have to read or do we have to...
We have to read.
Okay, fine.
We have read no individual rises.
Oh, we have read.
We read that.
But
yeah, you have to do it, Ranganath.
You went to the next paragraph, moreover, and you did this paragraph and you missed the before paragraph.
Okay.
Please explain. You jumped one paragraph.
Okay, so now we'll do no individual rises, right?
Yes.
Okay, I'm reading each sentence and we'll discuss it. No individual rises to these heights except in intense moments. No society yet created satisfies this ideal. What is the ideal? Absolute truth, absolute justice, absolute humanity. Okay, so nobody has been able to come to that level okay, nor even the society. None of them have reached their ideal. And in the present state of morality and of human development, none perhaps can or ought to satisfy it. Now that's very interesting. None can satisfy, fine. But why are you saying cannot, should not satisfy? Because your understanding of what is truth is wrong. So if you are interpreting the truth in your own way, individual way, which is not always right, so naturally nature in her evolutionary process will say, this is a mistake, I won't permit it. Okay, that's what he's saying. So it cannot be done. But a spiritual man who is nearer to the truth, he can understand the truth, but he never imposes it. That's the problem. Morality we are imposing on everybody. But the spiritual man never imposes his ideas on others, or at least should not. Because some, if they have a little ego, you rise to the first, second level of the spiritual planes, and if a little lingering ego is there, you insist that that's the only truth. But he does not impose it normally on others. If others ask him, he may say, but he will not impose it. Whereas morality is being imposed on everybody. Okay, that's the difference. So he's saying, none can perhaps or ought to satisfy it. Satisfy it is what? The ideal. The ideal of truth, justice, humanity. Love also. There are so many other things, but just remember to take only a sample of these ideals. Truth, justice, humanity. Now, he says, nature will not allow it. Nature knows that it should not be. What should not be? Imperfection. An imperfect interpretation of truth, an imperfect interpretation of justice, and an imperfect interpretation of humanity. Okay. So it's not allowed. Nature will not allow. The first reason is that our moral ideals are themselves, for the most part, ill-evolved, ignorant, and arbitrary mental constructions rather than transcriptions of the eternal truths of the Spirit. So, they are not transcriptions of the eternal truths of the Spirit. They may be less, but they are transcriptions. Interpretation may be limited, but not false. Okay? But mental constructions are necessarily at a very, very, very lower level. Very much at lower level. Mental constructions. You think it will be like this. Okay? I'll give you an interesting example of this mental construction. Okay? When Matri Mandir was being built, Satprem told mother and told everybody else also, Aurobidians, that Matri Mandir is something very sacred. So we should not employ paid labor. It should be a voluntary labor of our ashramites and Aurobidians. This is what he said. Now, does that sound very interesting and very true? But it is not. Mother said, no, I don't want that. I want that you should learn as quickly as possible and employ as much labor as you can. So this is a mental construction. See that? Now you understand perfectly what is being said. Okay? I'll give you another idea also. Okay? So but he insisted still. And the reason for that is, what is the guarantee that the paid laborers who are agreed that they are at a lower level of consciousness. But what is the guarantee that all the ashramites and all the Aurobidians also are pure and perfect? So it's an idea which does not correspond to spiritual truth. Okay? So these were mental constructions. There was somebody else also who suggested that all around the ashram, all the 4 roads leading, there should be no public parking. People are coming and parking their vehicles and all that. Okay? So that what will it do? It will vitiate the atmosphere. This was the idea. Okay? But again, this is a construction. Because all the ashramites, are they absolutely 100% pure that they are not vitiating the atmosphere? So these are what we mean by mental constructions. Okay? Rather than transcriptions of eternal truths of the Spirit. Authoritative and dogmatic, they assert, what is it? The moral ideals. They assert certain absolute standards in theory, but in practice, every existing system of ethics proves either in application unworkable or is in fact a constant coming short of the absolute standard to which the ideal pretends. Okay. Now, the other thing also I heard an interesting thing in Aurobindo. They are saying that Aurobindo is made for Aurobillians to dedicate themselves to. I'm giving another example. Dedicate themselves to the pursuit of your spiritual life. So, but what is happening is when there are playgrounds, for instance, okay, and other facilities, the villagers who are not Aurobillians, they are allowed to come and play also. Okay. Now, the idea that they should not be allowed to come and play is again a mental construction. Because what is the guarantee that you people also are absolutely perfect? Number one. Number two, how do you know that some villagers somewhere will not turn around by associating with Aurobindo? So these are some of the questions that come up. So these are what he meant by constructions. Mental construction, mental ideas, which are not necessarily always true. Okay. So I go back to the text. Authoritative and dogmatic, they assert certain absolute standards in theory, but in practice, every existing system of ethics proves either in application unworkable or is in fact a constant coming short of the absolute standard to which the ideal pretends. If our ethical system is a compromise or a makeshift, it gives at once a principle of justification to the further sterilizing compromises which society and the individual hasten to make with it. Now, this is a very interesting statement, and we'll also see what he means by sterilizing compromises. Okay? So, when you sterilize something, you are not allowing microbes and all that to come in. Okay? So, you are excluding certain elements. So, sterility is using in this sense. Okay? He is using very interesting word to mean exactly. It's symbolically it is being used. So, I read that sentence again carefully. You see, if our ethical system is a compromise or a makeshift, in other words, we are allowing certain laxity in the ideals. It gives at once a principle of justification to the further sterilizing compromises which society and the individual hasten to make with it. So, the compromises, the sterilizing compromises become even more strong. Okay? And if it insists on absolute love, justice, right, with an uncompromising insistence, it soars above the head of human possibility and is professed with lip homage. You agree with it, but ignored in practice. Okay? You say, yes, it's true. One should never tell lies. One should not murder others. But it continues to be. It's only lip homage, lip service, but ignored in practice. Even if it is found that it ignores other elements in humanity, which equally insist on survival, but all refuse to come within the moral formula. Okay? And now we come to what he means by sterilizing compromises. It's very interesting. Okay, so what he's saying is that there are many other elements in humanity which are contradictory. Okay? For instance, we discussed, I think, one day, love and justice. Both are required and both are absolutely necessary. But they are opposites. They are in the world of duality, they are opposites. Okay? Justice demands that even if somebody has made a mistake, he should be pardoned and dealt with in a loving manner and a compassionate manner. Love insists on that. But justice says, no, he should be punished. That's our idea of justice. Okay? So these are all opposites at our level. Okay? So this we do not allow. Then the other thing is also discipline and freedom. Okay? They are opposites. Any discipline, any rule that you make for discipline is an infringement of your freedom. So this is what Srindu is saying, that when you make very rigid rules, you don't allow certain things to come in, okay, you don't allow them to come in, then you are actually doing something very wrong against nature. Because nature allows the development of all things, and slowly it is progressing towards that. Okay? It has to be an integral development, not a selective, exclusive development. That's what Srindu is saying. It's a very interesting thing. For instance, I'll give you one, which is the most striking one. Okay, um, in the record of yoga, Srindu says one has to be a master. One has master. You have to be king, control, complete control over yourself and others, everything else. Mastery, Aishwaryam. You have to be Ishwar. At the same time, you have to be obedient to the divine. And you have to have dasyam. You have to be a dasa. Now these are opposites, no? But this is that's why he calls it integral yoga. So this is very interesting. Nobody has dealt things in this way. You should be a servant of God, and yet you should be a master of yourself. Okay? And even the world, you should be a master of the world, like the was. Okay? So these are very interesting things. Okay? So, I now come back to the text. Okay? Even if it's so we have seen that these things are opposites, freedom and discipline. So how to do? Let nature evolve. Through evolution, these things will get solved. Okay? That's the thing. So nature will not allow your absolute ideals which are unworkable. It will not allow. In other words, telling lies and murdering will continue to remain until you become a spiritual person. Then automatically it will be shed off, it will fall off. Like dry leaves, it will fall off. So the problem will be solved automatically. But it can never be solved at the mental level. At our normal level, not possible to solve. Now, I read the next one. For just as the individual law of desire contains within it invaluable elements of the infinite, infinite whole, which have to be protected against the tyranny of the absorbing social idea, the innate impulses too, both of individual and of collective man, contain in them invaluable elements which escape the limits of any ethical formula yet discovered and are yet necessary to the fullness and harmony of an eventual divine perfection. Eventual divine fullness and harmony. In other words, all the opposites that you see here, they all have truths. Okay? So I'll give you two examples of what he's meaning. Okay? Suppose a child is very mischievous. Okay? You tell him not to do the mischief, that's wrong because you are not allowing him to have full play of his possibility. Rather, what you have to do is this extra energy that he has got and is misusing, turn that energy to the right path. Don't punish him. Don't let him feel neglected. Don't put pressure on him. Tell him to change that energy into something which is useful. So this is one way. Okay. Then another way I'll give you also. Okay. So, for instance, at our level, we see very easily human beings love and hate. Love turning to hate, because that is very natural. When your love is imperfect and it is rejected, you hate the person. It's there every newspaper, every day you see people are throwing acids on girls who are refusing them. Okay? So this is, now I give you another one. What about desire? We are asked to get rid of desire. But can't desire become aspiration? Can't it become desire for the divine? So what Srindu is saying is, all those things which look negative to you, they contain in themselves, hidden in themselves, the principles which are not to be rejected. That's what he's saying. So desire also, you don't deny yourself desires, but look at, first of all, segregate yourself from your desires. Okay? They may continue for some time, but you segregate themselves slowly, not violent suppression. Because when you are suppressing violently your desires, you are actually harming your vital energy. So these what says that in nature, in our at our level, there are many principles which are opposites, but both are desirable. Okay? So this is what is. Okay, I just read that sentence again. With its background, you will be able to understand what is said. But just as the individual law of desire, okay, contains within invaluable elements of the infinite whole. Now, what are the principles? Invaluable elements. One is desire is full of energy. When you have desire, you go out of your way to satisfy it. That's energy. Now, energy is very useful. Put it to other use. Don't waste it on desire. Then the second thing is desire also can, the object of desire can change. So the principle of desire, which we are asking you not to do, it comes into this one. So it comes into, there's so many elements in it which are useful, invaluable elements. I gave you two, okay, of the infinite whole, which have to be protected against what? The tyranny of the absorbing social idea. Okay. The social idea. We have to do this, we have to do that, the moral ideas. The innate impulses too, both of individual and of collective man, contain in them invaluable elements which escape the limits of any ethical formula yet discovered and are yet necessary to the fullness and harmony of eventual divine perfection. Okay. It applies to everything. Everything that you see here, which is negative, there is an element of something in it which is good, which is positive. Okay. Very interesting what Sri is saying, because he is talking of the whole. We are only seeing parts. That's the whole problem. So we come to the last. This is something that is also. He also says about truth and error. He says error is punished normally. Okay? There is a mistake, you should not do it. But mistake is very, very useful because it tells you which path to go to now. You make a mistake, you understand that that's the wrong path. So truth and error are eternal companions, he says. Okay? Each helps the other. Truth helps you not to make mistakes, and mistakes help you to go towards the truth. Okay, we come to the. Is this the last? Yeah, it's the last paragraph. And we have got 10 minutes, so we can finish the paragraph, the chapter also. So who will read today? Tuesday is Pallavi's day. So Pallavi, read the last paragraph. It will be fitting for you to read. You began, and today you will be ending the chapter.
Ranganath, this chapter is not getting over.
Are you sure?
Yes, Ranganath.
It's not getting over.
I saw those three stars and I thought it's the end. No, it is not. No, it is not. Doesn't matter, read it. At the end of the page.
Yes.
Moreover,
Moreover, absolute love, absolute justice, absolute right reason in their present application by a bewildered and imperfect humanity come easily to be conflicting principles. Justice often demands what love abhors. Right reason dispassionately considering the facts of nature and human relations in search of a satisfying norm or rule is unable to admit without modification either any reign of absolute justice or any reign of absolute love. And in fact, man's absolute justice easily turns out to be in practice a sovereign injustice. For his mind, one-sided and rigid in its constructions, puts forward a one-sided partial and rigorous scheme or figure and claims for it totality and absoluteness, and an application that ignores the subtler truth of things and the plasticity of life. All our standards turned into action either waver on a flux of compromises or err by this partiality and unelastic structure. Humanity sways from one orientation to another. The race moves upon a zigzag path led by conflicting claims, and on the whole works out instinctively what nature intends, but with much waste and suffering, rather than either what it desires or what it holds to be right, or what the highest light from above demands from the embodied spirit.
So here explain what we have actually discussed here, explained in detail. It's quite clear, but we can go through each sentence. We have discussed quite in detail, so it's quite understandable what you say. Moreover, absolute love, note the word absolute love, okay? Absolute justice, okay? No mixture. Absolute right reason in that present application by bewildered and imperfect humanity come easily to be conflicting principles. Okay, it reminds me also of what you said about war and violence in the essays on the Gita, which you remember. Okay, he says that at the present level of humanity, war cannot be excluded because strength and violence can go either right way or wrong way, and strength is necessary. So it cannot. He says, what he says is the debt to Rudra must be paid before we can get the Vishnu aspect. Okay. So, Rudra, the violence, the debt to Rudra has to be paid. That means to say, unless man reaches another level of consciousness, okay, war cannot be avoided. That's what he said. Violence cannot be avoided. The violence can also be used in the right way. Durga is killing the asuras, but there is an absolute right way and a wrong way. So that's what he's saying also here. Moreover, absolute love, absolute justice, absolute right reason in their present application. By whom? By bewildered and imperfect humanity, come easily to be conflicting principles. Justice often demands what love abhors. We have so many cases now in Delhi, these horrible murders, and Nirbhaya is the word they use for that one case. Okay, I forgot the exact detail, but the family wants that the murderer should be hung. He should be even punished. Okay, he should be punished with the worst possible punishment. But what does love say? Love says everybody makes mistakes. Be tolerant, but that the family will not absolutely agree. The victim family will not agree. So love abhors violence. We said that earlier also. Right reason, dispassionately considering the facts of nature and human relations in search of a satisfying norm or rule, is unable to admit without modification either any reign of absolute justice or any reign of absolute love. And in fact, man's absolute justice easily turns out to be in practice a sovereign injustice. We have seen that. A person is jailed because he committed a murder. After 25 years, you see that actually he did not commit it. It was somebody else who did it. Injustice. Okay. Then there is also another thing. Okay. I see sometimes there are videos of the court judgments. So in one case, there is one judge in America who is very, very lenient. Okay. So suppose a very poor man has committed a traffic violation. He has to be punished. He has to pay a fine. But this judge, he employs rather the principle of love and compassion. And he says, I make it less for you. How much can you pay? Or if you can't pay at all, I will give you one warning and let you go free. So he is employing the principle of love and compassion. So we have to compromise. Okay, so that's what he's saying. With the absolute ideas. Absolute ideas are rigid and unworkable. Okay, that's what he's saying. In fact, man's absolute justice easily turns out in practice to be a sovereign injustice. For his mind, one-sided and rigid in its constructions, puts forth a one-sided, partial and rigorous scheme or figure and claims for it totality and absoluteness, and an application that ignores the subtler truth of things and the plasticity of life. Life is too complex to be put into rigid rules. We have to take into account so many things. All our standards turned into action either waver on a flux of compromises or err by this partiality and unelastic structure. Humanity sways from one orientation to another. The race moves upon a zigzag path led by conflicting claims and, on the whole, works out instinctively what nature intends, but with much waste and suffering, rather than either what it desires or what it holds to be right or what the highest light from above demands for the embodied spirit. So he's saying these things will continue. They will continue. They is not very easy to, very difficult to eliminate all these things. We all know, or at least most of you have heard about the problem in Aurobindo now. No? There is a deadlock, but the government has stepped in. Some people are saying the tree should not be cut for a scheme of the circular road or something like that. And others are saying that road is very essential and it's a primary in the plan. So there is a conflict, and the conflict is very violent there. Okay, so that this sort of thing is bound to happen, but nature will work out its own harmony in a very slow manner. That's what I'm saying, and with much waste and so on. Okay, so very interesting chapter. This whole standards of conduct. So we have come to the end of the page and the paragraph, but not the chapter. So next time we'll continue with the fact is that. Okay, so okay, has to note down the fact.
Yes, I'll make a note.
Yeah. Okay. So au revoir, everybody. Have a nice.
Au revoir. Bonne journée.
Merci.
Merci.
Ranganath.